And there's a time at which you have to embrace your frailties, your flaws, your imperfections, and you have to say, this is who I am. I will strive to be better. But don't fool yourself. Everyone in America is perfect. No one ever apologizes. Howard Dean can call the Republicans all kinds of names, and it would be no big deal if he said, you know what? I did, call the president a name, Republicans a name. I'm sorry. I'm not perfect. I try my best, but sometimes I fall, and I'm sorry. And people would respect him for it. Nope. No one in America ever apologizes. And Harry Reid called the president of the United States a loser. And he would have gained everybody's respect. And he said, you know what? I'm a senator, and I picked myself up from very humble origins, which Harry Reid did. And he's a Mormon who really came from poverty. He's now the Senate Minority Leader, and he could say, I should have called the president a loser. You know what? I'm not perfect. I try my best. I try to serve my constituents. I try to be a decent man. Sometimes I fail. I'm sorry. And I would love a guy like that. But a guy like that doesn't live in America. Never apologizes. By the way, even President Bush, who I so admire, is not perfect. And there weren't weapons of mass destruction. And he should have gotten up in front of the country, as far as I'm concerned, and said, you know what? I should never have said that we were going in only for weapons of mass destruction. We didn't find them. I still believe, however, we did the right thing because this man was a mass murderer. If I made it sound like there was only one reason, I'm sorry. Now, of course, the reason he can't say that is that his political opponents would tear him to pieces. They would take a scimitar and they'd cut him up. He did lie! Which is another reason people don't say they're sorry in America, because no one is prepared to accept an apology. But you see, my whole thing is that if I made a mistake, I have to say I'm sorry, whether or not people will accept it. The obligation to apologize has nothing to do with the recipient accepting it, and everything to do with the offender having a moral obligation to apologize for their bad behavior, period. The obligation is on you, not on the person who you offended. They don't have to accept it. They should. They should have an open heart, and they should accept it. You know what, folks? I'm not afraid for you to know I'm flawed. I'm not afraid for you to know I'm imperfect. I know it, you know it, we all know it. That's the way it is. But so many other people, they're just afraid for people to know they're imperfect. You know how many husbands and wives will never say they're sorry to each other? Sorry really is the hardest word. Elton John got it right on. It really is the hardest word.
Everyone in America wants to pretend they're perfect. No one makes mistakes. We never hear any apologies. So Pat Robertson, who does a lot of good but says a lot of nutty stuff, he said that we ought to nuke the State Department. I think we ought to shut down the State Department. I don't think we ought to nuke it. But he never apologizes for anything, and this has become an American trend. Religion should show humility. Religion should show that we religious people who claim to be religious, because all of us, as I said, all of us religious people, we're not holier than anyone. We're not better than anyone. We make mistakes. We're just human. Let's stop this false charade that we're better. We're more committed. We're more committed to a religious life. We hope we're better, but there's no guarantee. And religious people can screw up just as much as secular people. And when we do, we ought to be the first to come forward and say, man alive, I screwed up. I blew it. I made a mistake. I apologize. I'm sorry. But there are no apologies, because people pretend to be perfect. And I related this to my own radio show, where I constantly get people saying to me, Shmuley, you're a rabbi. How could you how could you have said this? How could you have done that? How could you speak over callers? Which I can sometimes do. I don't think a lot, but I sometimes do it. And if it's pointed out to me, I say, I'm sorry. I really am not perfect. And as I said, if you want perfection, you're at the wrong show, man. This show is hosted by a human being, not a cyborg, not an angel, not a saint. I don't even want to be any of those things. I'm happy that I'm human. I'm happy that life comes. For me, it's been a struggle. All of life has been a struggle. I love my wife with my heart and soul, but marriage is sometimes a struggle. It's not that our marriage has problems. It's rather that the need. My wife is sitting here right here in front of me. It's not that the marriage, God forbid, has problems. It's that in order for me to be a selfless, altruistic human being who shares his life with someone else and always accords her respect and talks to her even when he's depressed and puts her first, is sometimes a struggle. These things don't always come naturally to me. And if you're looking to a radio show for perfection, then you got to go somewhere else, because I'm going to let you down. And you're not going to learn anything from here. Why waste your time? You should have high expectations of people's behavior. You should expect a lot from people. But sometimes the people are human, and they do mess up. Welcome to reality. In life, folks, you have to be courageous enough to admit your frailties, admit your imperfections. And I am not perfect, but neither am I a coward. And if I make a mistake, I will admit it. So here's a unique opportunity for you. I have a real commitment to grow. And if you're not prepared to accept criticism in life, you will never grow. You will be the same pathetic mediocrity that you always have been. When I was close to Michael Jackson, what destroyed him is that he could never accept criticism. What destroyed Elvis, all these big celebrities, they could never accept criticism. What destroys people in the public eye in the United States, they just don't like criticism, and they start surrounding themselves by sycophants. I will never do that. My wife is my critic. My kids are my critic. Do you guys know what I did last night? One of the most painful nights of my life, to be perfectly honest. I really believe in being close to my children. So when I was sitting with this family yesterday, watching them, and the way the show works is shalom in the home, peace in the house. They go into a family with cameras, they leave the cameras there, and they watch all the family's behavior for like 3 or 4 days. Now, the first day, the family's on their best behavior because you're in front of cameras. By the second or third day, you become inured to the cameras, and your real behavior comes out. And I decide what I want to speak to them about what I've seen in the footage. And then we show it to the family. Can you imagine how painful it is to see your errant behavior in front of your eyes? It's a very painful thing. And so obviously this show is only for the courageous, for the lion-hearted. But as I sat there yesterday on my first day of filming, I said to myself, God almighty, even as I sit and counsel this couple, and I thought I was giving them very good advice, what if someone were to do this to me? What if someone were to come into my house and film all my interactions with my children? If I yell at them because I lose patience? What if they filmed every interaction with my wife? Am I always charming? Am I always complimentary? Wouldn't I be ashamed? And I concluded I would be. And I said, you know what? This will never happen to me. I am going to ensure that I become a better human being before cameras ever come into my house. And last night at dinner, I sat with my wife and my 7 kids, and their kids even had 2 friends over. And I said with them, what we're going to do now, and I've only done this once before, is anything that you guys can point out that I must change as a father, as a husband, pour it on. So the only thing I ask is this, let's have a conversation. And the kids first giggled, didn't know how to react to that. And I said, no, I'm serious. Would there be repercussions? And slowly the floodgates opened. Well, Tati, you get frustrated with us way too quickly. Or sometimes you'll bully us into doing things. Or sometimes you want to make us afraid of you rather than love you to get you to do things. And I sat there listening and listening and listening. And try this with your kids. Seriously, see if you can do this. Heroism is always about fighting your own nature and trying to be a better person. My kids were respectful while they did it. They didn't overdo it. To take it further, listen to this. Then my 2 daughters who share a room, the 14-year-old and 13-year-old, asked me if they could see me at they sat up the whole night talking about this, 2 in the morning, because I go to sleep late. I write my books at night. And I spoke to my kids with my wife in their room. We went upstairs from 2 to 3 a.m. I learned so much about myself, being prepared to listen. It's so painful. Don't think that I'm this guy who can take all of it. It was very difficult to listen to. It's like someone take a knife and cut your heart out. It's painful to hear that your kids, sure, they love you and you're their hero, but you're a flawed hero. But if you're not prepared to accept criticism in life, you will never change, you will never grow. If you're not prepared to accept criticism, I've sort of been fixated on Elvis ever since I went to Graceland. Seeing him, his grave, what a waste. And so I read this biography about him. He could take no criticism. He was just like Michael Jackson in my friendship with Michael Jackson. There's a story that Elvis was getting to know Priscilla, and he played some music for her the first time she came over from Germany, where her father, who was an Air Force officer, was stationed. He played some music for her, and he said to her, so what do you think? And she gave her honest opinion. She said, well, I like it, but I like your faster songs like Hound Dog and like Jailhouse Rock. And he immediately blew up on her and said, you think I need your stupid amateur opinion? I have enough dumb amateurs advising me already. Oh, just shut up. And he stormed out of the room. Now, later he apologized to her. But just think about that. You ask a young woman, what do you think about my music? And she says, I don't like it. You, bitch, go to hell. You're an amateur. When I used to criticize Michael Jackson, he wouldn't react that way. Michael was too gentle a soul to ever scream or yell. I never saw him scream or yell, but he would just retreat into himself, and he didn't want to see me anymore. Couldn't take criticism. So if I'm not prepared to take criticism, then I'm lost. And I am prepared to take it. I want to show that people who claim to be religious have to be prepared to be criticized when they make mistakes. Pat Robertson, you humiliated religion by calling for some guy to be murdered. If he were a murderer himself, kill him, absolutely. But Hugo Chavez is not that. Hugo Chavez is a bully, he's a bad man, but he's not a murderer, and he's not Saddam Hussein. And let's not confuse the two. There are gradations of evil. I don't mind being imperfect, meaning I only mind being imperfect if I don't care about my imperfections and I don't seek to be better. But I revel in being human. It's okay. You don't have to be perfect. But human beings who wrestle with life, they're interesting because if there is no internal struggle, if you have no predisposition toward selfishness, wickedness, and you never have to fight yourself to be good, then you're not heroic. Then there's no struggle going on. You're just not a warrior. Now, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. You're just not a warrior. I would rather be the warrior who fights himself and fights his own nature to be better. All public figures in America pretend to be perfect. They never apologize for anything. Michael Jackson didn't apologize after he admitted to sharing a bed with children. Had he apologized, people would have liked him. That's what also surprises me. That people who apologize actually, I think, are endeared themselves to the public. They show they're prepared to take responsibility for their actions. They show that they're human.